Can you hear me? All right, so that means the audio is working. I'd like to welcome everybody to today's Meet the New Superintendent and Facilities Roadshow, sponsored by the Fremont Unified School District. My name is Eric Burmeister, and I am the new superintendent here in Fremont, and it is really the honor of a lifetime to be a part of this community. This is day 52 for me. I started on July 1st. And I have sincerely enjoyed every single one of those 52 days. We have an amazing team of individuals. We have wonderfully supportive parents and community, the brightest and most delightful kids, and the hardest working staff in education. And I am so honored to be a part of this group. And I'm grateful for the confidence that the Board of Trustees has put in me. And I look forward to many years of thoughtful relational leadership here in Fremont Unified. Today, we have organized this event and the subsequent 4 or 5 other events that are going to be a repeat of what we're doing here today. It's going to be a mix of presentation and Q&A. And so as we present, we're going to be really focused on the high-level narrative of not only who I am, but also where we are going with our long-range facilities plan. And then we're going to use the rest of the time to answer your questions. So each one of these events, some virtual, some in person, are going to be are going to have a different feel and a different flavor to them based on who's in the room and what kinds of questions come up. This is also our dress rehearsal. It's our first one. So as a result of that, we are going to learn from our experience today, and we'll improve it as we go. And so we may add slides, we may take slides away, we may edit slides, but for the most part, the content is going to stay the same. Now, this content is going to live on the website. We are recording this. We'll probably publish the one virtual one that appears to be the most thorough and the most succinct in terms of being able to answer the questions and doing so in a timely manner. But we will provide opportunities for whatever comes of this virtual and in-person roadshow to be able to be shared with others. So this is not your last chance. This is the first chance. So if you know people who would like to be here, but who are not with us currently today, please let them know that the website has information right there on the front page about how to access the rest of the events that last through the end of September. And then in October, we're actually going to be coming back, and we're going to be doing very similar events. But this time it will be focused on our balanced budget input process. You may be aware that we have to cut about $30 million from our general operating budget in order to achieve a balanced budget for next school year and ongoing. And in order to do that, we're going to have some hard conversations as a community, and we want to involve everybody. And so in October, you're going to have the opportunity to join us again. And so we're excited to be engaging with the community over the course of the next two months. So let's go ahead and dive in. I'm going to introduce some folks who are with me today. Only one is going to be on screen. You can see him here, and that is Danny Hillman, our Associate Superintendent, who oversees our business, facilities, many other departments, but business and facilities specifically related to today's presentation. And I'll be handing it over to him in just a few moments. Everybody else, we have a large number of our district staff and leadership who are on the call today, who are listening in, and I want to thank them, and I'll talk a little bit about introduce our cabinet members and our board members here in just a moment. But kicking it off, Laura, if you want to click the next slide. Just want to tell you a little bit about myself. I am a graduate. I grew up kind of all over. I wasn't an Army brat, but based on my parents' desire to sort of live in different places, I had the opportunity to live in a number of places. I was born in Indiana. I did my elementary school years in Southern California, my middle school years in Atlanta, Georgia, and back to Indiana for my high school years. And then I attended undergraduate university at Ohio University in Athens, Ohio. and came out to Northern California in 1996 to study educational policy analysis in the master's program at Stanford University. And once I landed in the Bay Area, I knew there was no going back. And so I've been in the Bay Area with the exception of 1 year where I lived in South America and learned Spanish. I have been in Northern California in the Bay Area and have served almost that entire time in public education. I was a high school teacher. I taught high school English and speech and debate in both Ohio and California. I also coached volleyball and speech and debate at the high school level. I also served as a high school activities director, a dean, and a vice principal in the San Jose and Campbell areas in Santa Clara County. I was a middle school principal and then became a middle school principal in Menlo Park. In 2012, I was selected as California Principal of the Year, and then moved on to the national level where I was a finalist, one of 3 finalists for the National Principal of the Year award, something that I say not to pat myself on the back, but to give you a little sort of insight into what I hope is the quality of the leadership that I was able to provide as a site leader. I then moved into an assistant superintendent role where I was in charge of both educational services and human resources. Before the pandemic, I think it was in 2018, maybe 2016. I honestly don't remember the exact dates. I was named the superintendent of Menlo Park City School District over in Santa Clara County, where I served up until about a year ago, at which time I needed a break from the superintendency after COVID, and I decided to open a consulting firm and did that for about a year, and then was eager to get back in the game. During my time as superintendent, I was selected as the 2020 San Mateo County Superintendent of the Year, and largely that was in recognition of the work that we did in Menlo Park during COVID. I'm a bilingual English-Spanish speaker, and I'm a devoted father of 3 busy boys, one of which is out of school, but I have one that is a freshman in high school and one that is a 5th grader. And so my life is full. I enjoy my job and I enjoy my kids, and that's about all the time I have in my world to really focus on anything. I'm super excited to be here. Some of these pictures that you can see here, I was at a conference this year actually, where I got to meet Bob Nye, the science guy. And the picture of the student shaving my head there is a picture of when I was a middle school principal, and I challenged kids to basically increase their reading scores. And the 2 kids that increased their reading scores the most in the first trimester got to shave my head in front of the whole school. And so that was a really pleasant memory. Next slide. And so that's a little bit about me. And the reason that I am so excited to be a part of Fremont Unified School District is because of the outstanding schools, the amazingly talented and dedicated staff who I've been so impressed by, and really the community who really supports both education as a whole and their individual child's experience. When I came to Fremont, I was like, wow, this is such an incredible community, but also Fremont's reputation precedes itself, right? It is regularly selected as the best place to raise a family in the United States, the happiest place, the least stressed place. And then I came and I met the staff and I was like, this is just such an incredible community. I've really landed in a terrific spot. And then I visited the school sites, and I would say, while the people are wonderful, our school sites need a little bit of love. And that's really what we're going to talk about today in just a moment. But next slide. Included in these great people that I have the opportunity to work with are the Board of Education, and I just like to shout out to them. If you don't know who your board representative is for your district, if you know your area number, you can identify who your board representative is. We have Yajing Zhang, who is our president from Area 4, Larry Sweeney, who served on the board for many years from Area 2, he's our vice president, Diane Jones, who is our clerk from Area 3, Sharon Coco, who is a board member from Area 1, and Vivek Prasad, who is a board member from Area 5. And then we have our student member, Sri Yaneti, who brings just a wonderful perspective to all of our conversations. And I'm so grateful to Fremont School District for years having a student board member, even before it was the cool thing to do in California. You are always welcomed and encouraged to attend our public board meetings, either virtually or in person. And our board really does love hearing from you. I would invite you, though, if you're coming to a board meeting to complain about something, which is your right to do, I also want to let you know that staff is ready and prepared to answer your concerns. And so if you have a concern, don't wait until a board meeting to go and try to have your concern addressed. Please reach out to us and staff, and you might be surprised how quickly and effectively we can get your concerns and questions answered. Next slide. So the executive cabinet here is made up of myself, the superintendent. I am the one employee of the board, and honored to be so. I also serve with Leticia Salinas. She goes by Letty, and Letty is our assistant superintendent of instructional services. Danny Hillman, who's joining me today live, is our associate superintendent. And as I said before, he oversees business and facilities as two of his major departments. There are others. And he will be sharing a lot with us today about the work and the planning that has gone into the long-range facilities plan. And then last, but certainly not least, is Zach Larson, who's our assistant superintendent of human resources, who's been with the district for many, many years. I don't know how known this fact is, so I don't want to say it's a little known fact, but an interesting fact is both Danny and Zach are graduates and grew up in Fremont, the city of Fremont. And so we're really appreciative of the connectivity and the history and the tradition that is alive and well here in Fremont. Next slide. So I want to tell you a little bit about my first year goals. These are actually directly from the goals that I have worked with the school board to develop. And so I'm being very transparent about what those goals are. My first year goals include engagement with students, staff, families, and communities. This is a standard goal for all new superintendents. I've been, I think, to over 20 sites in the 53 days that I've been here. And I'm really proud of that. I've been to all 5 of the high schools. And I've been to most of the middle schools and a good number of the elementary schools. And I'm grateful for my team here in the superintendent's office who's got me scheduled out over the next few weeks to make sure that I can get to all of our school sites. But in addition to that, you'll find events like this that are some casual, some more formal. There are opportunities for you to reach out to me and for me to reach out to you. You also see that I'm super engaged in trying to go to community events. I was at the Indian Day Parade this weekend and had a lovely time. And I really want to meet you when I'm out there. And so please tap me on the shoulder, introduce yourself, and I look forward to meeting you. Another focus, as I alluded to earlier, is our balanced budget for fiscal sustainability process. We are starting next year, we'll be operating in a $30 million deficit. We don't intend to keep doing that. And so we are going to plan. The reason that this is the case is expenses are rising, enrollments are decreasing, and requirements are becoming more complicated. And we are also coming upon what is known as the fiscal cliff. And that is a term used to describe the ending of several one-time funding programs that came about as the pandemic came and the pandemic went. That came from both the federal and state government, and those funds are coming to an end. We have to wrap them up, and many districts' budgets, including ours, grew. Some ballooned, ours just grew, and now it's time that we right size once again back to pre-pandemic levels. We also have a big board policy update overhaul. This is more sort of inside baseball, where the sausage is made, but basically we are moving to a new board policy management system sponsored by the California School Boards Association. And we are significantly behind on getting up to sort of like the current legal requirements for our board policies. And in looking at doing that, we also realize that many of our board policies are obsolete, out of date, in conflict with one another. We have lots of policies that have been on the books since 1983, and we just really really need to purge our policy roles, so to speak, and make sure that our library is really tight, easy to access, clear and concise, and legally defensible. So that's what we're going to be, another project we're going to be working on this year. We've got a big pilot of our multi-tiered systems of support going on in several of our schools, and that will be the foundation for the work that we do to meet the needs of all students moving forward. And I'm really impressed with the work that's happening through our instructional services department, led by Assistant Superintendent Salinas. And I'm really excited to support the work that they are piloting this year. All districts are, all companies, all districts, everybody is dealing with rising cybersecurity threats, and school districts are no different. And so we, for the last year, have been engaging in a pretty robust cybersecurity rollout, which is about halfway through. And I want to commend the board, Danny Hillman and his team, for doing an absolutely outstanding job. I know, and I want to acknowledge that we've had some technology hiccups at the beginning of the year as we've transitioned to new cybersecurity standards. And so you may be thinking, why is all this change happening? This is why all this change is happening, is we are going to be much more secure. Our student data is going to be much more secure. Our systems are going to be much more secure. And not only is it a data security issue, but it really is a loss prevention plan, right? Because when you have attacks on your data, you can end up paying a whole lot of money to get that fixed. And so we want to make sure we do not put ourselves in that situation. I also want to really work on a culture of responsiveness within our community. As I said before, if you have a concern that's going on in the district, don't wait to bring it to the board meeting. Come to us, come to staff. Let us know what challenges you're having, what ideas you have, that kind of thing. And I really want us to have open lines of communication among all of our stakeholders. That is a priority of mine. And I want you to experience that the district is responsive in return. And so we're working on all the ways that we can focus on user experience, our primary user being the students, but also really important users of this institution, which are our hardworking staff, parents, the community, elected board members, other electeds outside of school board members, and so forth. And then we have some work to do on our committee structure to make sure that it's clear how people can get involved in the process of what we call extended governance beyond the school board. We have a lot of committees, but their impact is maybe limited by how they're organized, or what their goals are. And so I'm going to be working with the board to really make sure that we can improve our extended governance process, which is largely done through our committee structure. And then last, but certainly not least, is a really, really big focus, which is our long-range facilities plan. And as I shared with you before I came to Fremont and had the opportunity to apply for the job, I was just thinking to myself, wow, how wonderful would it be to be able to serve a community like Fremont that has so much going for it. It's just high academic achievement, community that supports schools, amazing and talented staff, and a community feel that regularly gets it rated as the best place to raise a family. And when I got the job, I was elated. And then when I saw the facilities, I was like, wow, we have a lot of work to do. And it's not anybody's fault or problem. Fremont is in a very similar boat to a lot of school districts that really grew about 60 years ago, when we saw all of these population booms in California. And now it's time to go back to those original facilities and really make sure that our students are having the experience, have the facilities that match the quality of learning experience that they have experienced here for generations. Next slide. So that is why we're bringing you together for this long-range facilities plan roadshow. Our job is not to advocate for any bond measures. Our job is to simply provide you with information about the condition of our facilities and the plan that we have put in place that will help us to address those facility needs. Next slide. As you know, I think most of you know, Fremont Unified is a very large district that experienced for many years a huge population boom, and we're going to talk about that just a little bit today. We have 43 school sites of 33,000 students and over 4,000 employees. We are the 24th largest district in the state of California, and we are the third largest in the Bay Area. And the only two districts that are bigger than us in the Bay Area are San Francisco and Oakland. This is a destination district, and we are, in order to sort of really support the facilities that are required to maintain a district of our size, is truly a monumental feat. And I have to give our team here an incredible amount of credit for the ways in which they've supported our facilities, most of which were built in the 1960s and 70s, to last as long as they have in relatively really high condition, but it's time. Next slide. So our mission is to provide equitable opportunities that educate, challenge, and inspire students of all ages, talents, and ability levels, while preparing each with the skills required to adapt and succeed in an ever-changing world. And our facilities need to reflect our ability to do that. Our students are graduating into a state-of-the-art world, and they are, for many of them, not learning in state-of-the-art facilities. Next slide. And so with that, I'd like to pass it over to our Associate Superintendent, Danny Hillman, who's going to give us an overview of where we've been, where we're going, or excuse me, where we are and how we got there, and where we're going and how we are going to achieve the goals within this long-range facilities plan. Danny, take it away.
Thank you, Superintendent Burmeister. Good evening, everybody. Good afternoon. If we go to the next slide, I'm going to start off with talking about the long-range facilities plan. Our current long-range facilities plan was adopted back in 2014. And at the time, about $1.6 billion in facilities needs were identified. And so that became, I think, one of the big, I wasn't here at the time, but from everyone that was, they've told me that that was a big point in time that allowed the voters in 2014 to get behind the Measure E General Obligation Bond, which basically raised $650 million for FUSD schools. And the scope of that work, the purpose of it was to upgrade and repair all the schools that we have, repair things, construct new things, acquiring new equipment for classrooms, the school sites, and just generally for the facilities. On the next slide, because of this community support, we were able to get that bond. We are still implementing that bond. It's been 10 years. We still have projects that are ongoing this summer and will continue into the fall and next summer of 2025. On the next slide, one of the key things that we're very, very proud of with Measure E is the stewardship of basically the taxpayer dollars and the accountability that the community helped district staff maintain throughout the program. So Proposition 39, which was passed back in 2000, is a state law that basically allows for oversight with the Board of Education for citizens in the community of Fremont to come together along with our auditors. It's a team of people. And so for the life of the Measure E program, we have a Citizens Oversight Committee made up of residents right here in Fremont who have worked with district staff to make sure that we are spending the money appropriately, that we are following the language of the 2014 Measure E bond. And because of that diligence, the district has been able to save the community more than $51 million so far over the life of Measure E through taking advantage, basically, of opportunities in the financial markets to redo the financing and make the payment terms shorter than they otherwise. So basically refinance the Measure E bond sales over time to make sure that we are taking advantage of whatever's happening in the market. So we've been doing that. It's been successful. And that's something that we continue to do and will continue to do into the future. On the next slide, Our facilities are still in need, however. You may remember I mentioned the dollar amount at the beginning. $1.6 billion of need was identified 10 years ago, and Measure E was only 650 million. So what's happening with everything else? Well, we're doing the best we can with it, but the facilities that serve our students are still in need of repair. We still need to renovate more things, and this goes back to some of the talking points that Superintendent Burmeister was mentioning just a minute ago. On the next slide, we've used different versions of this, but I think this one might be the most clear cut. Basically, this is just a graph showing the amount of square footage that we have, building square footage. So this isn't open space, this is just buildings that we have in FUSD. And you can see that the large majority of the square footage we have was built in the decade of 1960. That's when the district was formed. It makes kind of a lot of sense. But you can also see over time, we've added more permanent square footage. That's the yellow bars. And you'll notice that when the district was growing in the 1990 decade and the early 2000s, the solution at the time, probably because of a lack of funding, was to do the blue bars, which is portable square footage. So that's that relocatable classrooms that you can bring in on a trailer and set down. And so you can see that that was the solution that was used the most during the 1990s and 2000s, a little bit in the 2010s. The unfortunate thing about portable buildings, they just don't last that long. They don't have the lifespan of a permanently stick-built stucco exterior building that can get you, 40 or 50 years worth of life. Portable classrooms don't last that long. So what we're finding is that things put in play or put in place on a campus in 1990 or 2000, if it was a portable, it really needs to be replaced with something permanent. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a second. So on the next slide, what we wanted to do was get into, this is just a section header, but we're going to get into the how we developed the long-range facilities plan and some of the steps we've taken over the last couple of years. So on slide 18, you'll see basically a timeline. There's lots of different factors going into this plan, and one of them is constant and ongoing support and feedback from community members. So the green bar is our Facilities Advisory Committee, which has been a longstanding committee. It's a board-approved committee, meaning the members are voted in by the board, and it follows all the same, most of the same rules as the board with Brown Act. And so they're public meetings. Everyone is welcome to come to the public meetings. We take minutes, things like that. We also had several subcommittees from the Facilities Advisory Committee, the red bars there, the purple bars on your screen, depending upon your screen color, who met over 2023 and 2024 to help us refine some of the things that we were, the milestones, the goals, the what are we doing with this plan? Those kinds of questions were helped by the people who sat on the subcommittee, who sit on the advisory committee. We also, during that time, staff did site walks at every single school site. We got staff input from a staff meeting at every single staff, at every single site. We also did a bunch of data collection going back all the way to October of 2020. That process got stalled a little bit with the pandemic, but we took that data, we validated it. That was part of the site walks. We wanted to make sure that what staff was telling us was a problem was actually a problem. And then we went back to staff and said, so you said it was a problem. You're right. We saw it. It is a problem. What else can we do to help solve it? And that process has gone over, as you can see, the last 18 months or so. The Board of Education has had a couple of formal presentations on the long-range facilities plan. You can see the orange there back in April of this year, last spring. And then most recently in June, they saw a very detailed project list. And then most recently, in the end of July, they saw a first draft of the long-range facilities plan, and that's going to come back to the Board of Education next week for hopefully their final input, and they'll take a vote on whether they approve it, and then we'll go forward from there. So on the next slide, we want to get into a little bit of what the long-range facilities plan, what's included and what's it for. So the long-range facilities plan defines the long-range goals for facilities planning that support the educational goals of the district. You saw that Superintendent Burmeister talked about what the goals and the vision of the district are. Well, if you have a long-range plan that's about the facilities, they should coincide, they should overlap. At the very least, they should inform one another. So the idea of having an updated long-range facilities plan is that it's going to present a very clear vision and a set of guiding principles for any projects that we do in the future. So the plan includes a complete list of identified projects, and it has prioritized those projects. We're going to talk about that. We'll show you that link. And it's also developed a prioritization framework. So why did we pick the projects we picked to go first or second or 10th? Well, the framework helped determine that. And that framework can be applied to any future projects that come up. Maybe we didn't identify a particular project now, but in 5 years from now, we say, that's a need. We need to do something with that. We can then use the same framework to figure out how that reprioritizes all the other projects. Do we need to bump something up the list, move something down the list? These are all elements of the long-range facilities plan, and basically things that we think the community should familiarize themselves with, so that you can understand how we got to the draft project list that the board has looked at. The one last thing on this slide I wanted to mention is that because the long-range facilities plan is just that, it's a long-range plan, it's going to take many, many years and lots of phases of work on our campuses to truly transform them in the way that our vision has set up. And so we might have to come back to a campus 1, 2, or 3 times over a 10 to 15 or 20-year period to truly renovate and revolutionize what's happening on that campus. This is really the first bite of the apple, if you will. Maybe the second bite. The first bite was Measure E. Now we want to come back and do more work, and we're going to talk about that. So on the next slide, getting into the vision a little bit, there's 2 key areas, and I mentioned this already, that this implementation is going to take multiple years, could take multiple decades. But the first kind of goal of this is to replace aging buildings and maintain safe and efficient facilities. So many of our buildings, as you saw from that graph, were built so many decades ago, some in the 60s and the 70s, that replacing, upgrading them, repairing them gets very expensive. And we'll talk more about that in just a second. But the overall goal and the overall vision of this long-range facilities plan, the 2024 version, is to replace as many aging buildings as we can, including those portables that I talked about, those relocatable buildings that really just are not a good build quality. We need to replace them with something permanent. Overall, what do we want these new buildings to be? We want them to provide a high quality learning and growth opportunities for every student. That's the synergy between the district's goal of educating students and how the facilities can help do that. So this is what we were able to, with our help of our board and also our facilities advisory committee, distill down to 2 very salient points. This is the vision for the long range plan in summary. On the next slide, we wanted to mention 2 programmatic things that have changed since 2014, the last time we had our long range plan that was drafted back then. The state of California has introduced a new program, a new grade level called transitional kindergarten. It's for 4-year-old students. And basically the state that is rolling this program in over several years for students as young as 4 years old to precede kindergarten. So this becomes the new entry level, grade level, transitional kindergarten, then 1st grade, so on and so forth. The second program that was introduced since 2020 pandemic was universal meals. The state of California is now reimbursing school districts for every meal that gets served. The old program was the state would reimburse school districts for meals served only to students who qualified. Typically, those students' families had low income, and there was a sliding scale and a calculation for that. But now the state has enough money, and so they have been reimbursing schools for every meal that gets served. This is a great program. It's wonderful for our students. It's wonderful for our families. We don't have to worry about students not having a meal. Everyone gets fed. If you want a meal, you get a meal. The downside to this is that it puts pressure on our facilities that were not built with this in mind. And so we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Also, these new rules for universal meals are requiring school districts to scratch cook foods. So as much as possible, we're trying to lean into this. We need to do some work to our kitchens to allow our child nutrition staff to get away from opening up a box of food, heating it up and serving it to kids, and instead open up boxes of ingredients and mix those things together to create food from scratch and then serve it to kids. 2 very different processes. Also, enrollment has changed since 2014. The district was experiencing, prior to and up through 2014, rapid increases of enrollment in the district. That was driving facilities needs and some of the decisions that were made during the 2014 plan, chief among them of converting our junior high schools from 7th and 8th grade schools to 6th, 7th, and 8th grade schools, which is freeing up space at our elementaries. The enrollment increase is no longer driving our facilities needs now. So in 10 years, that's changed. We do have small pockets of growth around the district, but overall we're declining and we're flat in most of our attendance areas around the district. So those are two big changes since 2014. And on the next slide, there's another big change that's happened at the state level. All school projects have to be approved by the state of California, very specifically this department called the Division of State Architect. And so there's been a rule on the books for years, but they haven't enforced it up until the last couple of years, 2022 and so forth, 2023. That rule basically says that if the improvements that you're making to an existing building, an old building, something that's been around for a while, are estimated to exceed 50% of the replacement value of the building, then the entire building has to be brought up to the current code in 2024. With that extra set of requirements, oftentimes it's cheaper to tear down a building and start from scratch than it is to try to renovate something that was built to the code in 1960 or 1970. So this has really been a game changer for not just Fremont Unified, but really school districts all over the state of California, as you're doing the cost benefit analysis of figuring out, is it worth taking this building that is approaching, 60 or 70 years old? Is it worth renovating this? Should we just knock it down and start from scratch? And what we're finding is that in some cases, it is cheaper to just build a replacement building brand new from the ground up. So with that and other code requirements, this has really been weighed heavily into our long-range plan that we've drafted and into the individual projects that are listed in the project list. Next slide, please. So I mentioned vision for the long-range facilities plan. Here are some of the guiding principles. Regardless of the project that we're talking about, regardless if we do it now or in 10 years from now, we've been able to land on these 4 guiding principles. So project implementation, the recommended projects provide a roadmap to addressing identified needs, and most of these are separated into smaller phases. You may have heard me mention earlier, it's going to take multiple years, maybe even a couple of decades to get a lot of this done. What we've done is developed some preliminary drawings and some preliminary plans that break a lot of work into small chunks. And what we don't want is the first phase that we do something, some of that to be disrupted by the second phase. So we've tried to take a very long range view of this and make sure that if something is broken into phases, that they complement one another so that we're not wasting money when we get to a third phase because we have to do something and knock down something we did in the first phase. That would be inefficient. So our project implementation is one of our guiding principles. The second guiding principle is modernization versus new construction. We're focusing on the phased replacement of aging buildings for the reasons I mentioned earlier about some of the program changes with DSA. We want our current program needs to be met, things like a transitional kindergarten and the need for our kitchens to be able to support scratch cooked meals. And as the LRFP is implemented, we want to limit repair and maintenance of existing structures. We'll have to continue to maintain certain structures over time, but if it's possible to go ahead and tackle a project sooner rather than later, we'll do that, and probably with new construction and modernization. Design efficiencies. We always want to look for design efficiencies. We want to make sure that the projects we build are easier to maintain over the life cycle of the building. We don't want to pick a paint color that's going to fade too soon. We don't want to pick a HVAC unit that's going to not have available parts in 5 years. So these are the kinds of things that we look at. We also want to standardize across certain things so that all of our schools are using similar types of systems. That makes them easier to maintain. We can keep the parts in our warehouse and we can go fix things ourselves. Those are the types of things that we will take into account when we design these buildings, whether they're brand new buildings or we're modernizing an old building. Design efficiencies is really important. And then the last one is long-term planning. As we mentioned, the updated LRFP will outline 15 to 20 years worth of projects. And then we will just match it up with available funding over those years and implement them as best we can. On the next slide, one of the things we talked about in the timeline form was how we collected data and got community input. This just talks about that in a little bit different way. It's not linear, it's more of a narrative, but we did get some data from site leaders. They provided feedback. We met with staff. We talked about all of this data and information with our facilities advisory committee. We also reached out to community and Fremont voters. We asked for feedback. If you've been living in the district for more than a few months, you may remember that. That was a push during the spring. And then we also met with some of our community partners and made presentations to some different groups. around the district to get their feedback on the plan as well. On the next slide, what we've been able to do is put together the needs that the sites told us about. We've added in opportunities that our facilities staff saw, along with some consultants and professionals that do this for a living, and we created our project list. The project list is in the long-range plan. It's one component of the long-range plan, but it's a current representation of all of the assessed needs. We validated those. The recommended projects are based on community input, the vision that we just talked about a couple slides ago, and the principles and the proposed prioritization framework. We've got projected costs for some of these, and we've phased the projects out. With all of the needs that we've identified, we are aware of $2.6 billion worth of facilities needs in Fremont Unified. 2.6. And that is after we've been spending money from Measure E. What that means is in the last 10 years, our facilities that haven't been able to be upgraded yet have continued to deteriorate. That's normal. That's the life cycle of a building. So the older buildings are getting even older. And with the needs that that are changing from program needs, and also what we're hearing from school sites, we added all that up. That's a big number, but that's a number you should keep in the back of your mind because it's going to come into play here in just a second. On the next slide, if you're watching this online or you want to find the presentation, that blue link in the bottom is the prioritized project list. It was approved by our Board of Education this last June. And as I mentioned earlier, it's been prioritized. It's in a certain order. We've got a couple of things in there detail-wise that I'll explain here in a second. There's a line that I'm going to talk about on the next slide, but we wanted to make sure people knew how to get access to the project list so that they could look at it and they could start asking questions or start talking about it. On the next slide, we identified that since the board has authorized putting a bond that is, I think, now been named Measure M on the November ballot for an amount of $919 million, what would that do for our long-range plan? How would those two things go together? Well, this is just a very simple budget that we set up of $919 million. If the voters said yes, if we sold all those bonds over the life of the bond, we estimate we would have to hold some of the money aside for program expenses and some escalation. Escalation is just a fancy word for inflation. It's a construction term. With that and some expected interest that we would earn on the $900 million of bond sales, we think we've got about $760 million in potential funding to start tackling projects on that project list. And so this is where we basically draw the line. So on the next slide, if we assume $760 million in change in project funds, we've identified that many projects above the line. And on the project list, you'll see we drew a line. And it's on the second page, I think, or third page. And so you'll see that everything below the line wouldn't be funded by the potential Measure M bond. And so this was our effort to try to meld together the action that the board has taken already for the voters to consider with Measure M and how that would help us implement our long-range plan. That's how the two things start to coincide. So the above the line projects would be completed over a 10-year span. That's one of our assumptions, and would obviously require additional funding. Anything below the line would be additional funding. We would need to talk about when to do those, when it makes sense for the district to do those. And so what we've tried to do is take the most urgent projects and put them above the line, and things that are still needed but not as urgent below the line. That's how the project list is set up. And it's an important element to have if you're going to start looking at it, because you're probably going to ask that question, why is this here and why is that there? This is one of the key considerations that we took into play in order to explain this. And then on the next slide, just to summarize it very, very high level, some of those prioritized projects fall into these groups. These are in no particular order. We'll just have them listed here. But one of the key things is district-wide implementation of solar. We want to try to put solar panels on as many district facilities as we can. That's not only the right thing to do for the environment, but it also lowers the district's costs for energy consumption, specifically to our PG&E vendor. The high schools and our TAC stadium, we have identified projects at every single high school in the district, all 6 of them, including Robertson, our continuation school, to construct new buildings, remove aging permanent and portable buildings, and improve the athletic learning spaces, including TAC stadium. Another big highlight is finishing the Walters Middle School conversion project. There's work going on there right now, but if we want to do more work there, that's one of the items that's above the line. As I mentioned earlier, because of the new programmatic change for child nutrition, constructing a central kitchen would be a very, very important thing to do so that we can continue to scratch cook and get fresh meals to students. And then, of course, there's lots of elementary schools that would have replacing of their aging facilities, updating their infrastructure, and support early learning, which is that new grade level, transitional kindergarten. We need to expand our classrooms and change those classrooms in order to house our 4 and 5-year-olds and in a way that is better aligned to what the program demands. That grade level is different than kindergarten. They need a different physical space. So with that said, I'm going to turn it back over to Superintendent Burmeister, who is going to talk about our next steps and what happens next. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Danny. I really appreciate that. And I know that you may be thinking, well, I want to sort of dig into the details a little bit more. We invite you to do so. We don't want to spend your very precious time doing that here. But the long range facilities plan does a great job of walking you through each of the projects, showing you pictures of what that might look like, giving you details about how decisions were made and so forth. So I encourage you to take a look at that if you're wanting to look that next level into our plans. And as we close up the presentation portion of this afternoon's meeting, I'd like to just kind of give an overview to you about what the next steps are. Next slide. So first, as all of you probably know, the board on August 5th took action to put a $919 million general obligation bond on the ballot for the November 5 election. The way that public facilities, particularly school district facilities, are built and maintained and funded outside of reserved restricted maintenance is the community gets an opportunity to decide how much, if they want to do it, and if the plan that the district staff and the board are putting forward is something that meets their needs and their desires. And that's really up to them. We are not here to advocate one way or another. But should Fremont voters approve Measure M, that $919 million in borrowing capacity will allow us as a school district to begin those prioritized projects that Danny talked about. Projects that cannot be funded by Measure M could be included in future bond efforts. So where that line is of sort of like 919 versus 200 or 2.6 million, there's still a lot there that needs to be done. That's for future efforts. Maybe if we have savings that we can identify, or as many of you might be aware, there is a statewide bond measure that is funded completely differently than a local bond such as this. If that passes, then districts who have construction funds through bonds similar to Fremont will be first in line to access matching funds. And so that might be another way for us to access that. What we've done is we know there are a lot of fact-based questions that we as a school district can answer. It's up to the community to decide whether or not they want to support Measure M, but the community is entitled to fact-based answers to the questions that they have about the facilities plan, about funding, about what a bond is, about how it works, and the process that this particular school district went through to get to the point where we are. And I'm happy to let you know that today we published a frequently asked questions, or FAQ, on facilities and bond on our website. You can access it through the link here or through the QR code that you see here on the screen. Also, if you go to our website, right there on the front page, one of those first initial tiles is the facilities and bond FAQ. Please feel free to share that widely, and I invite you to review that as well. Next slide. Some people want to know, like, where does, Fremont fit in with the Measure E bond money that we already have? What are we currently paying for, and how does that compare? Just want to show you here that currently Fremont is in the lower 1/3 of the school districts in Alameda County in terms of the bonding capacity or the bonding ask that has been approved. And what if Measure M were to be approved, it would probably move us into the middle of the pact. But this is how we compare to the other districts in the county. And I know that many of you would be interested in knowing that, so we added that slide to this presentation. Next slide. I want to remind you that this is an ongoing roadshow. It's kind of the idea of the roadshow, some virtual, some in person, some in the morning, some in the afternoon, some in the evening. That calendar is available on our district events calendars, but you can see here the other events that we have. We have another one on August 30 in the middle of the day. It's virtual. Then on September 17th and 19th, we have two in-person ones at 6 p.m. And we tried to identify a location in the north and in the south. And then on September 26th at 10 a.m. in the morning, we have another one that's in person. So please make sure that if you know people who would have liked to have been here or would have benefited from being here, they certainly are welcome to attend any one of these others. We also welcome feedback. If you have feedback, please feel free to reach out to us and let us know what maybe we didn't include that you'd like to include. Maybe if we've provided information that you want us to, sharpen our pencil on and see if it's actually correct, we're happy to do that, and we're happy to improve as we go in this roadshow series. Also want to let you know that we have several board meetings coming up. There are often times when topics such as these will come up. In fact, our long-range facilities plan is not finalized or approved by the board just yet. They have considered it for first reading at their July 31st meeting, but it will come up for second reading and final vote on August 28th. So that's next week. We certainly invite the public to attend in person or virtually. We also have a regular board meeting on September 11th. You're always welcome to provide open comments at board meetings, even if the LRFP is not on the agenda. September 18th, we have a special board meeting. It's a workshop to really get the board started on the process and to inform the community on the process that the input process that we're going to engage around creating a balanced budget for fiscal sustainability. And then on September 25th, we also have a regular board meeting. So lots of opportunities to engage as a member of the public with your elected officials and with school staff. Next slide. And so now we're going to move to the questions section portion. It's about 4:52. We can stay here pretty much as long as it needs, but we're thinking that maybe 20 to 30 minutes for the number of participants are here might be enough. And so we're going to just sort of open it up to questions. Just want to remind you that this is a public forum and we're all doing our best here and we're all working hard, and just to have positive presupposition about people's intentions. We're going to do that for you, and we would invite you to do that for staff as well. All right, and with that, I'm going to open it up. Laura, do you have anything, Laura Forrest, who's our public information officer, do you have any directions to give the public in terms of how to go about asking questions?
Hi, this is Patty Sandoval.
Sorry, Patty,
how are
go
you?
ahead.
So I am online, and I currently see one hand that has gone up, and so we can start with Sai. And then this is the opportunity for everybody else who would like to speak. You can raise your hand, and I can go down the list. Sure. So Sai, go ahead.
Good evening. Thank you for this forward-looking view into the future of Fremont. Two quick questions. What input did the school district get from the city of Fremont in shaping the policy and the plans as they stand at this point in time? And two, to what extent can the plans enshrined in the LRFP be changed going forward? My understanding is that the CBOC is on record saying that nothing can be changed. So we'll appreciate clarity on both how we got here and what to expect going forward in terms of priorities. Thank you.
Great question. Thanks so much. I'm going to let Danny answer both questions. And I think I know what he's going to say, and we'll be in rabid agreement. So Danny, go ahead.
Sure. Thank you. So with regards to the city of Fremont, what may not be widely known is that school districts, because our approval comes from the state, we coordinate with local authorities, like we'll coordinate with local fire department, for instance, and any local planning, but our planning process goes through a state architect for approval, not the city of Fremont's planning department. So if there's coordination needed for, driveways or new light signals and things like that, that's actually something that's a perfect example of what's happening at Thornton Middle School. That expansion, the city is going to put in a new traffic signal a couple blocks away. We're participating in that. That's an example. But we don't go to the city and ask permission. That if we notify them that we're doing something, and they can give us some comments. But so that's one thing to note. But we coordinate with the city on all sorts of things. So as far as this plan is concerned, until we get to the stage where we are going to a very specific school site and saying, okay, we're going to start the detailed planning process, we don't really engage with the city because this is our best plan based on all the factors we've identified, but it isn't something that we necessarily ask for input from them prior to until we're ready to get into the actual detailed planning stage. So that's the one thing. And then the second question was about, I'm sorry, I forgot the second.
It was about, is the LRFP a living document, or once it's approved, is it set in stone?
Yes, thank you. So it is a living document over time. I think that our intention is that if we're following the vision that's been laid out, and if we're following the prioritization that has been laid out, we shouldn't see huge swings of, I'll just make up a number, the 50th project on the list moving to number 1. That sort of movement shouldn't happen because it's at number 50 for a reason. Now, could it go from number 50 to number 45? I'm making up numbers. Yes, possibly. Any changes to the plan or to the project list specifically, we would take back to the board. The Board of Education makes the final decisions on these sorts of things with input from our Citizens Oversight Committee, the CBOC, as well as the Facilities Advisory Committee. So that's kind of the short answer. It would depend a little bit more on the details of the question of what the change is that's being requested. And we could get into that, but generically speaking, that's how we are planning to approach changes to the long-range facilities plan as far as the phasing for the individual projects.
Okay, we're moving on to, let's see, caller with digits 8037. Go ahead.
Yeah, hi. My name is Rajesh, and I'm a parent of a student at junior in American high school. My question is specifically regarding it's not to do with the long range plan. It's to do with the course selection which we get, course assignment at the school. And my son is he's passionate about science. He wants to pursue career in STEM. And when the course request was sent, he chose for AP Physics 1 as his core course, not elective. But then now it seems they're getting some elective courses as what they'll be doing. So now this looks like he's not the only student. There are many more students, and specifically in AP Physics, it's like sounds like a course which is much more in demand. So I was just trying to see what we are doing towards solving this problem, and I mean, how are the allocations done, and what is the district really doing towards solving the problem?
Great. Thank you so much for your question. I appreciate you asking. Can I assume that your child goes to American high school?
Yes, yes.
Yes. So American this is actually very closely connected to the conversation of the long range facilities plan. So we have some limiting factors, particularly at American, but really all of our sites, is that over time, our students have become more and more interested in AP lab sciences that require lab facilities. And the challenge is that our facilities are, our labs, our computer labs and our science labs are booked every single period of every single day. And so, what that means is it limits our ability to offer the numbers of courses that we want to be offering in high demand areas. Now, that's sort of how your question is connected to this topic. And so I want you to know that one of the key components of the American high school plan is to expand our lab spaces for science and computer science, because right now we are thinking creatively. I just want you to know that while yes, there are about a dozen kids on the wait list for AP Physics 1, and about the same number, maybe a couple of more on the list for AP Physics C, our courses are chock full. So there are dozens, scores more kids who did get it than didn't, and the limitation is space. So what we've done is, thanks to Danny and his team for the AP Computer Science course, is we this week put together a computer cart and got it over to American, and we're now expanding the number of classes of AP Computer Science in a regular classroom that is not a computer lab, so that we could offer more sections. In addition, we are trying to get an additional physics class, either 0 or 7th period, because the lab is booked. It also is a challenge in physics, not so much in computer science, but it is a challenge to identify the teachers, because finding people who are both trained and credentialed to teach AP physics is very difficult in the state of California, but we are working on it. It is our hope that granted, we've only been in school for 5 days, so it's still plenty of opportunity to solve this problem. We are diligently working on it every day. We're chipping away at the problem. It's a staffing issue. It's a facilities issue. It's a capacity issue. And if we're not able to solve it in-house, we will be looking at what opportunities there are outside of the district to take the course and support the students with time and space to be able to do the work. The hard part is those particular classes, the Physics C and the Physics A class, are lab classes. And so doing them online is not an option. We've already checked, and BYU and some of these other online companies do not do it. So we're working diligently on it. We are aware of it. Even if we had the staff, we don't have the space right now. We're looking at some creative options, and your son or daughter will hear about what those options are as soon as we know. If there are other options that they are interested in taking and there's room in that class, I encourage them to talk to their counselor. We know this is an issue. It's a particular issue at American, mainly because of demand and the ability of space. And so we're working on it, and we'll get back to you. All right, Patty, any other questions?
Yes, I have one more. Anna Gibson. Go ahead.
Yes, excuse me. I actually have 2 questions. I apologize. I'm late to the party with the long range facility plan. And today's the first day I've actually looked at a specific elementary school's plan. Is there anyone in the next day or so that can explain to me the footprint and clarify what some of these changes in regards to the facilities, the buildings, basically? The plan and the pictures aren't really clarifying what areas it's going to be at. My first instinct is to look at this, and I see there is a huge problem with simple drop off, like where the streets align and where the buildings will be placed. Is there anyone that can sit down and explain to me what these actual building locations will be?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's difficult because with 43 different school sites,
Yeah.
It's difficult to know specifically. But the answer is yes. I'm going to let Danny sort of answer in general, because it says you mentioned elementary schools,
Yes.
sort of like how we approach the prioritization of elementary schools. And then Danny, if you want to talk just in general about egress, regress, which is an industry term for how people get in and how they leave a school facility.
Right.
But then I strongly encourage you to email Danny your specific question about the specific
Right. Okay.
site.
Yeah.
And I think that it's totally possible that we could get an answer for you about that school site in the next 48 hours or so. But Danny, can you answer sort of in general?
Yeah, absolutely. The first thing I should say is that the drawings are sketches that are the sketches that you're seeing, the drawings are very, very conceptual at this point. They are to outline an intent, but they are not the
Okay.
depth of an analysis that we would need to do in order to move forward specifically at that site. And it's still going to require, I really want to make sure the community knows this, a lot more detailed meetings with the site staff who live and work at these sites. And we're obviously, if there's going to be major changes to a campus, we might need to talk to the neighbors as well. So it just depends how close they are. So there's a lot more work in design for
Okay.
every single one of these school sites for all of the different phases. But conceptually speaking, we were trying to give people a visual so that they would know what the intent is. And
Mhm.
on the project list, there's some notation there that we tried to try to get it down to a summary so it fits in a cell and a line on an Excel spreadsheet. But the details are in the long range plan. We have basically for every single school site, like a 5 or 6 page spread that gets into some of those details of, oh, we're going to, I'm making this up, demo this building and take out 10 classrooms and add a 2-story with 12 classrooms, that kind of a thing. So we've tried to identify some of our thinking, but there's so much more design that's needed. We don't normally, the industry standard on this is you don't pay for an in-depth design until you know you have the money to build out the project. Because if you were to design it today in 2024, but we don't have the money to build something until 2026, the rules would change. We'd have to redesign it. So there's really no point in getting a super in-depth design at this moment until we know we have the funding. And then we would pick off that whole project and say, okay, now let's dive into the weeds. Let's hire an architect to do all the coordination with the city and the state and all of the different trades that have to go into that. You got to know where the electrical is and the plumbing and all the things that you can imagine. So I would be happy to try to answer your more detailed question. If you have a specific one, please feel free to email me. And if I can't answer it, I'll get our facilities team and we'll take a look at it and get you an answer quickly.
Hi, it looks like I have, let's see, a follow-up question from Sai Nagarajan.
Thank you. I appreciate the continued transparency. Superintendent Burmeister, you had mentioned during the opening remarks that part of your goals this coming year or going forward is to look at committee restructuring.
Mm-hmm.
Given that the Board of Education has authorized a ballot measure to go on, or a bond measure to go on the ballot this November,
Mm-hmm.
amounting to almost $1 billion here.
Mm-hmm.
I'm keen to see how FUSD would strengthen governance, given that there are, certain, again, public records, right? Individuals that serve on the Facilities Advisory Committee, but are also part of the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee, who might also be affiliated with the PTA at various levels and also further affiliated with other groups registered with the FPCC. So when you step back and take the macro policy view of this question from a public policy and a principles perspective, deeply curious, maybe even concerned that when the dots connect around the same or similarly affiliated, closely affiliated individuals serving on various committees, the spirit of independent citizens oversight might be violated. So I would encourage the administration, certainly the board too, to consider this concern in good spirit and figure out ways in which the governance can be cleaned up so that we don't end up with a situation where the same individuals or connected individuals are both on the requesting side, the advocacy side, the lobbying side, the approving side, and the oversight side. I think we'll all agree that's not healthy. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Duly noted. I'm happy to look into that. I'm not aware of any conflicts of interest per se. I will say to you, there are sort of like two clarifications. One is like forces at hand. So I know, having done this work for all of my career, that is very, very difficult to find volunteers. And so I welcome and invite any member of the community who wants to get involved and engaged, especially if they're not already connected to some other volunteer opportunity, to please do so, because we are always looking for folks. And so, I'll use your comments as an invitation to say, yes, it would be great if we didn't have to, if school districts in general, not just Fremont, didn't have to sort of fish in the same pond for volunteers every time. And so, it's getting harder and harder to find volunteers to be on unpaid advisory committees. And so please, folks, come, particularly if you have a difference of opinion from people who currently sit on those teams or committees. The other clarification that I wanted to make is that the one area that you did mention that is not how would I say it, that where there isn't any, in my mind, even chance of a conflict of interest, is at the decision-making level. So the CBOC, the FAC, the PTAs, they are only loosely associated with the school district. The school district doesn't, the PTAs they're an independent organization. They get to decide who leads them. We don't have any hand in that. The CBOC and the FAC, we do have some hand in it, but really we're usually begging people to participate. It's not like we're turning a ton of people away. There may be cases that I'm not aware of where people have been turned away, but we want people to be involved, but they are only advisory. The only entity that makes decisions is the school board. And the school board is elected by the people. And so, I would just say advisory, maybe there's some crossover and so on and so forth. But again, that's just advisory. At the end of the day, the decisions are made by the school board, and the school board's elected by the people. So I just wanted to put that in. But I totally agree with you. It would be great to have different faces and different perspectives on all of our committees.
Excuse me. Let's see, Ashley Hogg.
Hey, thank you. I don't actually have a question, but just, I guess, a follow-up response to that. So my name is Ashley Hogue. I'm a member of the CBOC and have been just for the last school year and continuing into this one. And I wanted to echo what Superintendent Burmeister said, that there's plenty of room on the committee. We've actually had open positions the entire time that I've been on there. And not only from, parents or interested parties specific to the maybe the group that's on here, but also, business leaders in the community. There's plenty of positions available, and we'd love to have your face and your voice there, and tell your friends. That's all. Thank you.
And I'll just mention Patty, who's on the screen right now. She's the executive assistant to the superintendent and basically runs the superintendent's office. She's the person responsible for getting folks connected to different committee opportunities. So if you are on this call and you are interested, please reach out to Patty and Sandoval. Her email is actually M Sandoval, not P Sandoval, because her birth name starts with an M. And I won't embarrass her by saying it because I have no idea whether she wants people to know, but it's M Sandoval at fusdk12.net.
Thank you. And I have a follow-up question from Anna Gibson.
Can you provide clarification on the difference and what the role is for Bond Oversight Committee versus Facilities Advisory Committee?
Excellent question. Yeah, Danny, I'm going to let you take that, but I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. So the CBOC is the oversight that is required by the state. So the state legislature in the year 2000 created Prop 39, which basically allowed for school districts to put a bond on the ballot at a lower passage rate, meaning they could go at 55% wins instead of 2/3, which would be 66%. But to do that, you have to have an independent citizens bond oversight committee that reviews the expenditures. So the CBOC's bare minimum requirement of their existence is to make sure that the expenditures that the district is spending on construction projects funded by the bond are within the language that the voters approved, and that they do an annual report to the board about that. They minimal only have to meet once or twice a year to review the expenditures and report, are they seeing that or are they seeing something else, to the Board of Education. Now, that being said, CBOCs in different districts do slightly different things, meaning they sometimes get involved in other decisions and give advice. And so their role becomes more advisory at that point, but their actual oversight duty is about the expenditure of the funds. So they're looking at it after the fact to make sure it's been spent appropriately. Now, sometimes they get involved before the funds get spent and they give their advice and their opinion about something. And I think that's the case here in Fremont. They've been involved in lots of different things with regard to the projects. The Facilities Advisory Committee is completely advisory. And so they are providing their input on building design and where things should go, but they're also looking at stuff that's not construction project related. They're looking at how we clean our bathrooms. They're talking about how often the roofs get cleaned. There's other things that the Facilities Advisory Committee could talk about. A lot of their topics overlap with the CBOC. So we find ourselves having the same conversations in both circles. Staff doesn't mind it. We we practice and then we repeat it because both committees are interested in the similar topics. So that's the main difference between the CBOC. They are required to perform an oversight. They provide some advice. The FAC is all about advice. If I had to sum it up, that's kind of it.
That's a great summary. Thank you for sharing that. And I would also just say, he alluded to this, but I just want to make it really clear. The FAC is an optional committee. Not all school boards have this, but in a real effort towards transparency and community engagement, the FAC has been around for years, and it has been one of our most active committees. And that is, hats off to the Fremont School Board's current and past for prioritizing community engagement and advice when they are not required to do so. The CBOC, on the other hand, is a required by statute committee.
Okay, and I have Anu Kandari.
Hello, thank you. This is regarding AHS, American High Schools, again, physics program, AP Physics 1, 2, and C. I just want to thank you first for going out of the way and finding solution for kids, but also want to make you aware what is at stake here. The kids are working really hard and getting highest marks possible while being a full-time athlete here, and trying to help school also solve the cyber security thing in the freshman year, and getting a 5 in both APs that my child took last year. We are still waiting to get AP Physics 1. And he's like a really bright student and who want to pursue computer science. So I hope we solve this problem for him and for a lot of kids who are waiting here.
Absolutely.
Very patiently.
Yes, absolutely. We hope so too. I'm very aware and keen on what's at stake, and I want to be able to solve this problem. And Danny can attest to the fact that every day I'm having meetings with staff about how can we move this forward. And every day we get new wins. Today we got 23 more kids in AP Computer Science, and tomorrow or very soon I hope to be able to get those dozen kids into AP Physics 1, and hopefully very soon after that we can get kids into Physics C. Again, the facilities are our biggest obstacle right now, and so it just goes to the point that, like, together we have to solve these problems. And I am really, really excited to hopefully someday open up a much larger science facility at particularly at American, because that's where the push is right now. But in all of our school sites to make sure that that we can meet the needs. But I am hopeful we're going to find a solution for each one of these kids. It may not be the ideal solution in the sense that, you know, we may have to, you know, go to Ohlone or we may have to do something else, but we are working hard and I appreciate your patience. You know, we're still only 5 days in, and I've told the principal if it's, you know, if it's a couple more days, let's at least start getting the students their first curriculum packet that they can be, you know, starting to study without the lab equipment, but be able to study the content at least. So we're working diligently.
It looks like that is it for questions.
All right, great. Well, that brings us to 5:20, which means we've gone about an hour and 20 minutes. This is great. I was hoping for an hour and 15. So we'll chalk this up as a win. We already know some rearrangement and some changes that we would do on the deck as we've gone through it once. I want to thank all of you for your time and attention. I want to thank you for your warm hospitality of me as your new superintendent. And I look forward to continuing to partner with you. Please tell your friends to join us. And if they at our future events, and if you have any questions about the facilities or bond, many of them can be answered using this QR code. So with that, we thank you and we wish you a wonderful evening.
Recording stopped.